I had your back against Geraldo, right? I defended high funeral value against one of Geraldo's exposés. He wanted to know, why am I selling Mrs. Johnson all these expensive premium funeral goods? I just want to be real clear what the value proposition is here at Monarch and Moreau. We help you increase your bargaining power at the point of sale, at the bargaining table. That's where your value proposition and your marketing is either going to be validated or undermined. Now, if you think that's a bad thing, you might be scared of the sales stigma. You might be a little scared that Geraldo Rivera is going to roll up to your establishment and ask you why you sold all that funeral merchandise to Mrs. Johnson. Me, on the other hand, I hope Geraldo Rivera rolls up so I can prearrange him. I'm going to say, Geraldo, I'm not in the least bit sympathetic to Mrs. Johnson's price concerns. And listen, when I sell to people like sweet old Mrs. Johnson, I'm not even trying to be empathetic necessarily. You see, Mr. Rivera, that's what everybody does. And it's just not enough, is it? Exceptional care in the funeral business requires more than just empathy. It requires compassion, doesn't it? You see, we compassionately helped Mrs. Johnson find a way to purchase the casket of her dreams despite her initial perceived financial limitations. And if you ask Mrs. Johnson, her only regret, Mr. Geraldo, is that she just didn't do it sooner. And that's what she's told all her friends, and I imagine, Mr. Geraldo, that's what she's told you. That's why you're here. Now, looking at the casket up close, and this isn't the exact one, it's an identical one. Can you see why Mrs. Johnson liked it? What do you know about Mr. Johnson? What do you think he might have liked about it despite the price? Right about there, Geraldo's going to get mad. He's going to say, I'm the one asking the questions here. And I'm going to say, well, Geraldo, do you really question whether or not we're delivering compassionate care here? And he's going to say, yeah, I do question it. That's why I'm here. I'm going to say, how exactly? Well, she didn't need that casket. Geraldo, when you say she didn't need it, how do you mean by that exactly? So Geraldo rolling up on me is just an opportunity for me to get the message out, right? That there's a high value for high quality funeral care. Now, if we're talking about high value funeral care, it probably costs a little more. So how do you sell it? Do we need to be more sympathetic, more empathetic? Or do we need to learn how to sell with compassion? That's what we talk about on this channel here at Monarch and Moreau. Top dollar funeral sales. How to get them, how to get more of them, what's most effective. Let's talk about it. So sympathy, empathy, and compassion. Which one is most effective? I'm going to give you an overview and then I'm going to break it down more in depth. Now, because of the sales stigma in funeral care, you're more prepared against what I have to say than prepared for what I'm going to say. And you might be one of those people who just never find any value in anything funeral sales. But I want you to hear this anyway. When it comes to sympathy, demonstrating and deploying sympathy simply means you have a pulse. You can see that the other person has a problem, concern, and you're acknowledging it. It's not a skill, it's a survival mechanism. If I'm empathetic, I'm actually trying to feel or do feel what you're feeling. So empathy is level 1, right? The ability to be empathetic. Some people can do that naturally. Anyone can be trained to do it. So with empathy, it's kind of a shared experience. But with compassionate care, it's understanding the emotional needs of the client, but not being overwhelmed by them. So think of empathy as the ability to look at the big picture. And think of compassion as the ability to step back from the big picture, recognizing it, but then asking, why is the picture so big? How can we simplify this? And so it's that next level ability to simplify and make things clear for our prospects. When the promise is clear, the price is easy. So empathy is being a companion during this difficult time, right? Sharing in the experience. I understand. I feel for you. I understand how you feel. I've been there. Let's try to bring this down to your level. Let's try to get this under your budget. Whereas compassion is a little bit different. Compassion brings with it the authority of a guide, right? And the purpose of the guide is to get somewhere in the shortest possible time, right? To really maximize your travel dollar on the journey. So we pay more for a guide than we do for a companion. So empathy is conversation. Compassion is expertise. So instead of a shared experience, it's a guided experience. Let's go a little bit further with sympathy. So Geraldo, there's levels to this, right? There's sympathy, which is detached. There's empathy, which is kind of like a shared experience. I guess you hired your funeral director to share the experience with you. Or there's compassionate care, where you hire the funeral director to guide you through the grieving process, get you to the healing process. Now, I want Geraldo to remember this, right? And sometimes the easiest way for us to get somebody to remember something is to associate it with something else, right? Even for us to remember, right? If we associate it with something else, we can remember it a lot easier. So let's start making these associations with sympathy, empathy, and compassion. I want you to start associating sympathetic behavior with your relief, not the family's relief, with your relief. Sympathy is our relief. Sympathy is where I show that I can see that you're going through something emotionally, but I'm going to stay detached. And rather than really understand it, I can just see that it's bad. And so I have a lot of pity and concern for you, but it's really from a detached standpoint. I might say something to you like, I'm so sorry for your loss. And I sure am relieved I don't have your problem. What about empathy? The association for empathy is putting yourself. With sympathy, the association was your relief, not the family. Sympathy equals relief for you, not for the family. Well, empathy is kind of in the middle. Empathy wants to even the playing field, really, right? It doesn't want to have an advantage at the bargaining table. It's more concerned with just things being fair, with almost no regard to your distinct value proposition and what your services are worth. Whether they're profitable or not is not the concern of the empathist, right? Empathy is where we bring ourselves to the level of the family to really feel what they're going through, understand what they're going through. But compassionate care isn't about being a good companion. It's about being a competent guide that safeguards the grieving process and moves you toward the healing process as fast as possible without complication. So what's that distinction at the bargaining table? It's being compassionate rather than empathetic. That's the difference. That's the distinction. That's the unique value that's going to command the premium price. When we're empathetic, families know that we're trying to understand them and then fit them into one of our offers. But when we're compassionate, they can see the difference in someone who's really motivated to help them on their terms without compromising what's important to them, maximizing their funeral dollar, safeguarding their grieving process, and facilitating the fastest possible path to healing without complications. That's the difference. With sympathy, the association was your relief, not the family. Sympathy equals relief for you, not for the family. Well, empathy is kind of in the middle. Empathy is where we bring ourselves to the level of the family to really feel what they're going through, understand what they're going through. Now, here's the trick with empathy is that you put yourself on their level, right? And so if we're trying to sell for top dollar, but our sales strategy is to put ourselves at their level, which is friendly companion, not competent guide. What do you think that does to our ability to command premium prices? So empathy is putting ourselves in the family's shoes, understanding and even feeling how they must feel. I know how you feel. I've lost somebody myself. This must be a very tough time for you. These are all very empathetic things to say, empathetic ways to feel. But empathy in funeral care is not uncommon. It's valuable, yes, but is there any real distinct value? So if we can't find any distinct value in our service, our offer, our delivery, where does the premium price come from? I was just waiting for you to think about that, really think about it, and then answer it. Is empathetic care really doing anything that most providers are not doing? So empathetic care by itself can't be the basis for premium pricing. So what's different? What's that next level? It's got to be compassion, right? Compassion is different because it allows. That's the association for compassion. It allows, right? It allows a good outcome. It allows a funeral director to give complete care. Whereas sympathy is just relief for you. It's our relief, not the family's relief. Sympathetic behavior, we associate that with our relief. Empathetic behavior, we associate that with going down to the prospect's level and having a shared experience. Compassion allows us to guide the family in the direction of healing. It includes a genuine and motivated desire to take action to help while maintaining a sense of emotional autonomy, stability, mental clarity, all the aspects that a valuable guide has. Compassion allows you to be different, to be a guide, to get your family through the grieving process and to the healing process faster than your empathetic and sympathetic competitors. And so, Geraldo, I know you want me to be very empathetic and just take an order, but if I do that, there's a strong possibility that a year from now, because Mrs. Johnson is going to remember this exactly a year from now, right? The anniversary of Mr. Johnson, her husband's death. She's going to think back to this moment, to our conversation, and whether I truly helped her make an informed decision by showing her what's on the menu, or I just remained empathetic and took her order. Compassionate care, Geraldo, requires a little bit more. Remember, if we help people get what they need, we'll have what we need. But if we help people get what they want, then we'll have what we want. Shouldn't we want for others what we want for ourselves? Now, in a sales situation, let me make this clear. Empathy is always going to be better than sympathy. So let's talk about why that is. When we're sympathetic, we're just going to reinforce any price concern. Remember now, on this channel, we talk about selling top dollar funeral sales. That's what we talk about here. That's what we're talking about now. Okay, so focus, right? Sympathy is going to hurt our chances to do that because whenever we hear a price concern, we get sympathetic to it. We're going to say, I understand. I'm sorry it's out of your budget. And all that does is reinforce the price concern. It does nothing to move the sale further. So empathy says that you genuinely understand and you want to find a solution that fits their needs, their perceived needs, what they think their needs are, even if they never thought about it before. What the difference could mean. So with empathy, you're not just seeking your relief, you're sharing in the pain of the prospect, but you're sharing in pain. Maybe you guys will end up splitting the difference on the pain, right? They'll get a little less care, you'll make a little less money. So that's why empathy is better than sympathy for taking an order. But let's discover why compassion is superior for capturing sales. When we consider the differences between sympathy, empathy, and compassion in the sales context, how do you imagine it would play out in overcoming a price concern? So the prospect has a price concern and you're sympathetic. So when you're sympathetic, the first thing you do is you feel relieved that this is not your problem. And you're going to acknowledge that it is a problem, but from a distance, you're going to be a little bit detached and you're not going to be real motivated to find a solution because the facts are the facts, right? I understand this is too expensive for you and I'm sorry you can't afford it. That's some very sympathetic behavior there. And it shows a real apathy toward the sale, toward your brand's success, your establishment success, your personal success, and providing the best possible outcome for every family. So while you do validate the prospect's feelings, you do nothing to move the sale forward and you reinforce the price concern. So where sympathy is detached, empathy draws us in, right? It puts us in their shoes and wants us to bring our prices down to the level that meets their expectations. Oh, empathy sounds something like this. Mrs. Johnson, I totally get it. I know, times are tough. Costs are expensive. Why don't we work together to see if we can get those costs down so that we can get this under your budget and save you some money, right? And empathy, that's what it does, right? It brings us down to their level of expectation. And when we do that, it's really a two-edged sword, right? Because it causes us to come down on the one end, and that's in the direction of discounting, or it makes us want to throw in freebies, right? Maybe free travel, maybe time-consuming activities for ourselves, but it makes us want to throw some free value in it, value that we're not going to recoup anything for. So that's what empathy tends to do. That's why it erodes profitability when it comes to sales. That's why to be profitable, we need those next level skills. We need to become compassionate sellers. Compassion is about wanting the best for our clients. Compassion doesn't just take an order. Compassion says, what would really be best for you right now? Let's try to find a way to make that happen. I know you've got some financial concerns, and maybe there's something we can do. Maybe there's some solution that prevents us from having to compromise. Sometimes when we don't know what's on the menu, don't make an informed decision. Sometimes we end up making compromises that maybe we didn't have to, could have been prevented. And that's when we look back with regrets. It's the preventable mistakes, isn't it? Compassionate selling says, I understand, Mrs. Johnson, that the price does seem high given your current financial situation. But what if we explored some options that could make this more manageable for you, like a financing plan or delaying the payment, or even some alternative payment plan that still meets your needs? So what we're doing is we're taking empathy and we're combining it with a proactive approach that looks to safeguard the family's grieving process and create the best, fastest possible path to the healing process. It allows for the best outcome. And it still allows the customer to say no, to only choose the services they want. But they don't know what they want if they haven't seen what's on the menu. And they're not making informed decisions if they haven't seen the menu. So compassionate selling does four things. One, it maximizes the customer's funeral dollar. Number two, it acknowledges their concern. Number three, it safeguards the grieving process. And number four, it provides the fastest possible path to healing. And maybe you're the type to just think this is all nonsense. But if I were to ask you, thinking of those three types, who's going to sell the price-sensitive prospect better? The sympathetic, the empathetic, or the compassionate? Who's your money on? Who should your money be on? If we're sympathetic, we might validate their concern. And if we're empathetic, we might be able to take an order or sell at a discount. But only when we become compassionate sellers are we going to be able to make that upsell sell at premium prices. So remember, sympathy is a recognition in disconnect, right? It keeps us detached away from the problem. We're apathetic. We never really try to solve it. Empathy is more of a connector, right? It immerses us kind of in their problem. We're a companion. And compassion is that next level. We're a guide. We're a way out. We're the safest, fastest path to healing. No matter how distinct the value proposition is, it's only validated at the point of sale at the bargaining table. If you have any sales advantage whatsoever, it's going to show up here. It's going to show up in your ability to command premium prices, or it's going to show that you can't do that. If it has an advantage and can command a premium price, then it's moved beyond the ordinary, the mediocre, the same. It's become distinct. The way that that happens at the bargaining table is not through empathy, but by becoming a compassionate seller. And so it's not that empathy is bad, it's that empathy tends to give all the value away. And in business, we compete for profits. It's your first number one priority responsibility to be profitable, because if you're not profitable, you won't be in business. And if you're not in business, you cannot keep your promises to your families. For one, to be there when they really need you. And you can't be compassionate some of the time, right? To some families and not other families, to your business families, but not your own family. You have to be compassionate and respectful to yourself, to the income and life you bring home to your family, the income and life you're capable or willing to produce for your family, and to yourself. To be different, you got to do more. And when you do more, you're worth more, aren't you? It's not a trick. It's not a secret. It's not rocket science. Listen, Grant Cardone says, we don't lose sales for anything we do. We lose sales for the things we don't do. The things we don't allow because maybe we're too afraid to lead. We want to be accepted into the comfort zone, into the inner circle, and we're too scared to maybe push people out of their comfort zone and be the dependent, competent guides that they really need if we're going to safeguard the healing process and the grieving process and provide the best outcomes for our families. And that level of care is worth more. But listen, families aren't going to buy it if you're not buying it. If you're not picking up what you're putting down, if it doesn't sound powerful and persuasive, compelling to you, it's not going to be to them either, for the simple reason that you're not sold and you have no inner wherewithal of self-sold to sell from. So sales is hard. You can't transmit mental ownership where sales is easy because you don't believe. The paradigm that you subscribe to doesn't have your services up here. It has them down here, average, kind of in the range with everyone else. In order to be a compassionate seller, to sell the difference, you have to know and be able to articulate powerfully and persuasively the value behind the price. Now, in order to do that, you have to have skills, techniques, training, a preparatory period. And here at Monarch and Moreau, we can help you with that better than anyone in the business. But hey, that's what this channel is about. And it's going to be about that better than anybody in the business. So if you're in the funeral industry, you're a funeral professional, and you want to learn how to sell the difference, that's why you're going to follow. That's why you're going to subscribe. You don't have to like me. You don't even have to believe me right now. But I guarantee you this, you stick with me for a few months, you'll never go back to doing it the way you're doing it now. I do know this, funeral professional. You just don't like what you do if you hate me. I had your back against Geraldo, right? I defended high funeral value against one of Geraldo's exposés. He wanted to know, why am I selling Mrs. Johnson all these expensive premium funeral goods, right? I had your back against Geraldo. I made Geraldo cry. That's why you mess with me. But if you do want to learn to sell higher prices, here are some clear next steps for you. Consider subscribing or following this channel, because we're going to be doing videos, training just like this. Go to the link. I don't need your email. You're just going to go to the link. You're going to get the notes from this presentation. But if you go to the link and get the notes, like the video. Anthony Spencer, this is Monarch and Moreau. In this video, I'm going to talk about selling at premium prices and the difference between being a sympathetic, empathetic, or compassionate seller. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Monarch and Moreau, and this channel is dedicated to funeral professionals who, although they don't have the lowest price, they wouldn't mind making the most money. That's what our training is about.